I've always been taught I want to spend my money like I spend my time and my time like I spend my money, and both on a budget.
We're kind of wannabe baristas.
Yeah, totally.
We were both baristas at
Actually,
one point in our lives.
Yeah. Should we say where we?
We'll let them guess.
You know who you are. It's speaking to that little boy and saying, come to me, come.
Dreaming together and thinking about and talking about life and what's our next move and what does that really look like practically? What does your planning session actually look like?
Time for love again. My time for love is here.
Welcome back to Quality Time with Gabe and Grace.
I'm Gabe.
And I'm Grace, and this is episode 12.
And if you did not catch last week's episode 11, you might want to go do that because we kind of dropped a big bombshell.
Yeah, big life update.
Which kind of coincides with this episode. So it's probably a good prequel to the sequel. And yeah, we are relocating from this state to another.
For all the deets, you got to go back.
Yeah, we're not going to give it to you. Yeah. We need those statistics,
recap.
You know what I'm saying? Engagement.
But it's an exciting time for sure. We're packing up. We're getting everything ready. We have really just weeks ahead of us before we ship out.
Wild.
So it's an exciting time. But we're pausing for a little bit more quality time with one another and with you listeners out there. No, but thanks to the listeners. It's been fun to hear feedback even after sharing about the move, people who are considering a move themselves. Things of that nature. It's been really neat just to conversate with people or converse with people.
Yeah, both. Yeah. I think. Yeah, it's been cool. We've been getting texts from friends that didn't know the news that are just like super excited for us. And like you mentioned, are being inspired to, ask the Lord in their own life, what might be next or, what are you saying? And so it's just, it's cool to have, it's cool to have that conversation with our peeps, but for sure. Yeah.
It's life changes like this too, that you get reflective, but then also you realize like just people not coming out of the woodworks, but like coming out of the woodworks in the sense of like people you haven't seen in a while or like you just start remembering like, oh, we have people over here, over there, in different parts of Florida. And like, it's just been fun hearing from people. So that's cool.
And again, like it's not to rally some mass exodus out of wherever, you're planted. I think the other response can be just a gratefulness for knowing that you are where you're supposed to be.
Totally.
And then being able to celebrate with someone else that maybe, God is moving into another season. So it really is meant to, like you said, have just a time of reflection and then gratitude and just really a check-in. And that's kind of what we're about to unpack in today's episode.
Yeah, I'm excited. All right. Well, before we get into today's topic, we're going to start out with a little quality over quantity. If you're new to the show, this is a quick segment we like to open up with where we share something, some product, some experience, some happening in our lives that has been quality. And we just share one, and that's what makes it quality over quantity. So I'll kick us off this week.
All right, go for it.
We've talked in other segments before about coffee, about our espresso machine and how it's changed our lives. We've talked about going from decaf to regular and back to decaf. But this week I wanted to share about the Gibraltar.
Ooh, my favorite.
So, we're kind of wannabe baristas.
Yeah, totally.
We were both baristas at
Actually,
one point in our lives. But like pre-cool coffee
before it was
shops.
Cool to be a barista. Should we say where we?
We'll let them guess.
You know who you are.
So anyhow, we've been in our barista era in our home. And we used to go to a coffee shop that served a Gibraltar. And you don't see that at a lot of coffee shops, especially around here. I don't really see a lot of people calling it that. And so I was looking up what is a Gibraltar because I used to order it and I really liked it. And I wasn't sure the exact ratio of milk to espresso. And it's a 2 ounce to 2 ounce ratio. And then I was like, well, what the heck is the difference between a Gibraltar and a cortado? Because we often order a cortado when we're out and about. It's like the perfect cortado actually means like to cut, right? So it's like to cut the espresso with a little bit of milk. It's a 2 ounce to 2 ounce ratio. So I'm like, well, what's the difference? So I do a little digging, and the Gibraltar, the only difference is that it's served in like a fancy Gibraltar cup. That's literally the only difference
Yeah.
between Gibraltar and cortado. So they're both my beverage of choice.
Yeah.
But I've been calling it a Gibraltar as I tend to be the slinging barista each morning.
Tell them what that means or why you say
Yeah,
that.
so I don't know. Whenever we were working in coffee shops, we'd be like, are you ringing or are you slinging?
Which that was not nomenclature in my coffee shop. That came from yours. So like a couple of weeks ago, she was like, she asked me that question. She was like, are you slinging or ringing? And I was like, I missed the
ringing
meeting on
is
that
like
one.
being on the cash register,
Yes.
and slinging is slinging drinks.
Slinging
but I don't know.
espresso. Yeah.
So I'm always slinging in the mornings.
She
So I'm like,
does.
what am I slinging for you?
Yeah, it's like shorthand. You know, like a couple episodes how we were like, you know, revealing our weird nicknames of bonks.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
That's kind of the compound. It's like, hey, what am I slinging at the bunk and bean today?
Exactly. You have to say it just like that.
Yeah.
No, but so I've been making a lot of Gibraltars, although I'm really making cortados because we need to get the cool glass. We have like a
they're kinda
cutesy
cool.
glass, but it's not like the traditional Gibraltar glass, which
gotcha.
maybe we can put a picture of it or something on the screen or
Yeah, or not. And
maybe not.
yeah, they can imagine
You can
it.
just Google it.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so Gibraltars have been making my life better.
Yeah, mine too.
We've kind of nailed like exactly, we like a little touch of maple syrup. So if you're wanting to copycat the recipe,
Yeah.
just a little touch of maple syrup in the pitcher.
Yes.
And then I pull the espresso shots into the pitcher
Yep.
and I swoosh, swoosh,
Course.
swoosh.
Of course.
And the hot espresso kind of takes in the maple syrup and they become one. And then I pour it into the glass that has a little bit of ice and some almond milk, pour the shots on top. And it's just, and if you're a real barista and you're like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, just DM
sorry,
us.
but that tastes good.
Yeah.
And that's making my life better. What about you?
That's amazing. So to set up my quality over quantity, I actually have a quick story. It's kind of like a context setting, right? So
All right.
when I was roughly somewhere between like 10 and 12, let's say, I took a aptitude test.
Okay.
You know, when you're trying to figure out what you're going to do for your living or whatever. And so
Yes.
whatever class it was, they were like, oh, kids, answer these questions and let's see what you're...
What would you be good at?
Yes.
Or
So this is crazy, and I almost want to make this my quality over quantity, but it's not. So in order, the three things that those questions, you know, computed was graphic designer, which
Wow.
is my actual job.
owns a design agency.
Yeah. The second was architect, which is like my second love, and
Wow.
maybe even in a second act of my career, I could see myself, you know, continuing to design homes, and that I just
Yes.
love architecture.
Gabe loves a good drive through a neighborhood
Yes,
just
I
to
do.
like ooh and awe
Yeah,
at
it's
beautiful
strange
homes.
how much that does it for me. But the third was chef, and you know this now because I love all things like cooking shows.
I just mentioned
and-
too that you're fancy in the kitchen.
Exactly. So my quality over quantity experience this week is, and I don't know that it's a new show, but it's just new to me. Mm-hmm. Me and your mom, who's been hanging out at the house,
Yep.
we've been glued to the Culinary Class Wars on Netflix.
Yes.
It's like a Korean show, so it's all overdubbed, like in, you know, captions and such, subtitles, and it is like the scale of this show is insane. The budget must be like an ungodly amount of money.
Wow.
Because it's just like they start with 100 chefs, and the whole concept of like the Culinary Class Wars is they've split the contestants 50 and 50. The half that are, you know, on the right side, they're called black spoons, and so they're all dressed in black kind of chef outfits. And those chefs are essentially the, you know, self-made chefs or the chefs that may own a restaurant but are not like Michelin rated, not super well known, but they're like up and coming, grinding it out, trying to make a name for themselves.
Nice.
And then the other 50 are the white spoons, and they are dressed in like these crisp white, you know, chef outfits. And those are the 1, 2, 3 Michelin star chefs, world renowned.
Wow.
You know, again, it's a Korean show, so I'm not super familiar with all of them, but like, you know, one of the guys there is Korea's best chef apparently, you know,
Wow.
and so it's a massive undertaking of what they're doing. And then obviously the show is a competition, so they're slimming the crowd by doing these, you know, competition challenges, and then they're eliminating 10 from this side, 10 from that side, or 20 from this side, whatever. And we just finished it last night, and it's making me so hungry all the time that like me and your mom were like, we're ordering Thai like right now so that we could be eating noodles while we're watching
Some sort
this.
of Asian fare.
Yes, so good. So it's super fun. if you love cooking shows, if you love like competition shows, like I'm huge, anything that Gordon Ramsay puts out, I'm watching it, like I'm just such a sucker for like MasterChef or Next Level Chef or anything like that. But this show, it was a slow burn because again, when you're reading the subtitles, sometimes, it's hard to get engaged.
Yeah.
But I swear I know Korean now. Like by the end of it, I'm just like, yeah, oh yeah, I got what he said.
I love it.
So all in all, it's just inspiring my inner chef, the young child that was promised a career in the culinary arts, but diverted to graphic design. It's speaking to that little boy and saying, come to me, come.
Let's go. What are you making us this weekend? Are you putting you in the kitchen this weekend?
Probably some Uber Eats. I'm just kidding. I'll think of my signature dish. It's probably something with caviar and gold leaf.
Wow.
I'm just kidding. I've never tried any
Were
of
they
those.
using that kind of
They
stuff?
actually were, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
But,
interesting.
yeah, those were like, beyond my pay grade. I've never tried any of those fancy ingredients, but...
You know where I need to take you?
Where?
You and that little inner child?
Yeah.
The Asian supermarket. You can get all sorts of very interesting ingredients.
We used to work like...
can't really
right
find
across,
it.
Is that the one you're talking about? The one we used to work by?
There is that one, yeah. And I think there's another one as well.
Nice.
But anyways, that'll be a fun little field trip. Weekend activity.
Come along.
All right, so let's get into this week's topic. I think it's perfect coming out of last week where we talked about the move because we were referencing, sort of dreaming together and thinking about and talking about life and what's our next move and all of that. And it's like, what does that really look like practically?
Sure.
I think a lot of people might have questions about that. Like, what does your planning session actually look like? Mm-hmm. And so I think we just want to break that down this week on a very practical note. Like if you're someone who is wanting to be a little bit more intentional about just planning things in life or sitting down at the top of the year. I know we're sort of in the middle of the year, so there's no designated time that this has to happen. If you just want to sit down and do it, it's a great activity. But we'll kind of break down our process today and explain it. And if you want to take out something to write notes with, this is a perfect time because you might just want to create your own sort of list or use our list and go from there. But this is something that we have been incorporating for many years. Yeah. We've been married 9 years. I'd say at least 7 of those that we've been kind of doing this annually. And so why don't you kick us off with just sort of breaking it down?
Yeah. So we're going to go over that list and sort of the template that we use. One quick note for any listeners or watchers that are by the end of the episode interested in having a copy of this.
Yeah.
We've actually made a downloadable PDF available. So you can go to qualitytimepod.com. That's our website. And just enter your email into the subscription box and we'll send you that download that you can literally just copy it, put it into like your iPhone notes or use it however, it would help you. But we wanted to make a resource available because it's a template that is maybe doesn't roll off the tongue to remember off the top of your head. So we definitely keep it written down. But we just thought that would be helpful to you. So this list that we're going to go over is actually made up of 8 sections.
Yep.
These sections act as areas of focus, sort of a criteria or a checklist for our life. Like you mentioned, we use it as a point of reflection to look at the 8 and say, how did we do on the last year of our lives? And then as a point of vision casting outward to say, these are the 8 pillars that we're going to build the next year on. So I'm going to go through the list and then we'll unpack them after the fact, but I just want to give you the numbers so you can kind of get a sense for where we're going.
Yeah.
So number 1 is kingdom, and we're going to unpack that word in a second.
Yeah.
Number 2 is relationships. Number 3 is work. Number 4 is family. Number 5, travel and experiences. That's a fun one. Number 6 is health. Number 7, financial. And number 8, marriage.
Excellent. And these are unique to us, right? So anybody who's making a list could, of course, put something else in there or take something out. I think the idea is it's always developing too. There's certain things that become very important in our lives that we've added to the list and it's maybe changed over time. But yeah, let's jump into each kind of bucket, if you will, and just talk about what that looks like and what that means for us. So the first one is kingdom.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? So for us, really, kingdom encompasses our calling, our purpose, everything that we feel God calling us to partner with him on for the year. And how are we going to be obedient to those things? Have we been up till this point? And what's the plan moving forward? And you can kind of unpack the word kingdom and where that comes from.
Yeah. Well, and as we unpack it, you might kind of think like almost everything then falls under kingdom. It's sort of like an overarching theme. But generally speaking, kingdom, we kind of get from the parable in the Bible from Luke 19, which is the parable of the talents. And it's different words are swapped out for talents in different translations. But generally speaking, it's a story of a nobleman going off to a kingdom. And he says, I'm going to be coming back. I'm going to give these servants these talents, or that could be translated as something to invest or multiply.
Yeah, resource.
And so those things are divvied out. He leaves, he comes back, checks back in. Some people have multiplied those talents, have invested them and grown them. Others have buried the talents. And so there is a different responsibility then given for the kingdom that's being established based on what you did with those talents. And so the idea is God has given us giftings. God has given us resource. God has given us actual talents and gifts and things that we can live our life sowing into others, sowing into greater purpose and using them. Or we can sit on them and just kind of be afraid to take steps, almost like we were saying last week, right? So you could think like, well, I don't want to mess it up, so I'm just not going to do anything with it. Or you can really work on making something of it and having a fruitful life, right? With the choices that you make with what you have in your hands.
Yeah, I love it.
So we think about that as the kingdom sort of principle of, we really do believe Jesus is king. He's coming to establish his reign in the earth. And what are we doing right now to prepare for that? Yeah. It's all about aligning our lives with the kingdom of God and bringing glory to God in what we're doing here on earth.
Sure. Yeah, and some of our listeners might be in vocational ministry. That's their profession, and that's how they make their living. Yes. So this makes total sense to you. But for those that aren't, we really see the whole of our lives as something that is sacred and not just a balance between sacred and secular. We feel like there's no division there. There's no divide. So when you have that kind of mindset and sort of worldview as you're going through life, you recognize that, like you said, even some of the other things on the list all do kind of roll up into kingdom, where we are trying to live a life and accomplish things that glorify God and that point back to him. And so that is really why it's the first on our list personally, because it's the umbrella that everything else kind of falls under. Yeah. And it's really the covering as well that we feel like everything else gets to come in alignment with. And so that's really special for us. So that's just, again, this is our life and our way. But that's kind of a context of why that word and even that placement is in our list.
Yeah. And I just want to make one note on that as well, as it might kind of sound like this very works-based sort of salvation as we're explaining it. And that really isn't what it is. There is a scripture in the Bible in the book of James that says faith without deeds or faith without works is dead. And so this is just the concept of like activating our faith and doing something with our faith. Good. It's not trying to make God love us or make God favor us with the things that we do. It's really just going, wow, like God loves us and God has given us great gifts. What can we do with them to glorify him?
That's good. Yeah. So number 2, which again kind of relates, but we said it's relationships. So the way that we define this bucket is really like our friends, colleagues, employees, bosses, anyone that we're in relationship with. Yeah. And we're going to get to family, that counts too. But essentially, we're asking ourselves, how are we serving the people around us? Yeah. How are we making them better? How are we making ourselves available for connection? Yes. We talked about that in our episode about, friendship in your 30s, that half the battle is just putting yourself in the position to be friendly and to be a friend. And then, recognizing that the dividends of that action often are deep friendship and connection. So in this bucket, when we're in the context of reflection, we're typically looking at the last year that we've just lived and asking ourselves, did we accomplish what we set out to in the relationship category? Did we enrich our relationships? Were we there for people? And then as we're, casting vision for the future, a really special part of that is, we ask God sometimes, Lord, who are some people in our circle that we already know, obviously, but that we'd like to get to know further? Yeah. We want to build a deeper relationship with. So maybe that's just putting, in a very practical way, not a creepy stalking way, but putting some names down, maybe even just one per quarter of like a couple or a single person in our lives that we're like, we're going to try to get together with them and be intentional just to love on them and to show them that we value them. And I'm telling you, it sounds, some of this, by the time we get done with the episode, might sound like this is so contrived and you guys are weird, but if you don't write it down, if you don't make that happen, especially as parents and, married people that are busy, it just won't happen. Yeah. So if you value it, you have to put time toward it.
Yeah, make a plan. Yeah, I think two things I want to say on this one. One being, this is a bucket for us that evolved over time, or we added it to the list, because I think that relationships can be an overwhelming part of life, especially as you are getting older, like we've talked about before. You have more on your plate and it can just feel overwhelming. There's so many people in your life. How do you connect with all of them? Yeah. If you're a little bit more introverted like I am, it's like you can just sort of go into shutdown mode. Like, well, then I'm just not going to see anybody. And so I think this intention of asking God, like, where should I be focusing with relationships this year? Yeah. Is there someone, like you said, that I want to grow closer to? And that could be a friend that's like sort of like a friend to friend, like equal. That could be like a mentorship type of relationship. Like I really want to glean from this person.
Yes, that's good.
Or it could be someone who's maybe younger or maybe newer to the faith or something like that you want to mentor or pour into. And so there's this sort of example that's given, I've heard before, where it's like using biblical characters to explain. So there's like a Paul, a Timothy, and a Barnabas. So Paul is like a leader, mentor type. A Timothy is someone you'd kind of pour into, and then a Barnabas is like the encouraging friend that it's just like you're running the race side by side.
Yeah, I love that.
So I love that sort of to evaluate, do I have a Paul, do I have a Timothy, do I have a Barnabas in this season? I think all of them play an important role.
Yeah, that's awesome. The third bucket, we're on work. Work. So
work,
for us,
work.
We don't have the rights to that song.
Because it sounded just like it.
So work for us, some of the questions we're asking ourselves are, what are the big goals and action plans that we've outlined for our businesses, for our careers? What are we doing about those goals and those plans?
Yeah.
How are we showing up? Obviously as entrepreneurs, that requires a different level of planning annually to make sure that your business ends up where you want it to at the end of the year. And it's a little different sometimes when you're more, working at a company and you're more career minded. You have obviously different tactics. So for us, we've just realized as we evolved into entrepreneurship, we realized that that's going to require a different level of intention and planning. And so and as entrepreneurs that both share a business, but then have our own separate businesses, it's just a great time to have like iron sharpening and another mind at the table to ask questions and get some feedback and insights. And so we've been able to really help each other in our respective fields that we really have no experience in, but now because you are exposing me to the world of dietetics, I'm like speaking your language, and I can talk about your business with full understanding, and you can as well with mine. So that's what we mean by work. And work doesn't have to be this drudge along soulless exercise. I mean, God's pretty clear in scripture about working unto him, and that work is God given. There's an argument that God worked in the process of creation, and that he was maybe even the first entrepreneur, the first creative. And so we take that very seriously. On the flip side of that, we also don't make work our whole identity. And so that's another important part about this list, is it's not just putting down the loftiest, most ambitious goals just to sort of prove to ourselves that we can, make it on some under 40 Forbes list or something like that. But really it's to accomplish, again, back to the kingdom mentality. That's a part of the talents he's given us. He's given us businesses to steward. And so we're really wanting to define that ahead of time and also reflect on that and say, what could have been better in this last year for our work?
And I'll add, I really enjoy doing this like with my spouse, because there is such an honesty and an accountability there. I think, we both had like business coaches or mentors or different things of that nature, but there is something about me telling you, like, this is my number one goal for my business this year, and I really want you to hold me to it. Like there is something in that there's an honesty and a push that we can give each other that is a little stronger, I think, than some other voices that we might invite in. So I've really enjoyed that as entrepreneurs. And I would even say even outside of entrepreneurship, you can have a work bucket. But I will say that if you're a single person doing this exercise too, I would say ask another friend if they want to do it with you, idea. Because the accountability piece is, I think, really important to this.
Absolutely. So. Let me pause right there on what you said in regards to the way you enjoy doing this with your spouse, because that's like a special kind of accountability.
Sure.
And I want to speak to the couples that may be listening that are like, we cannot work together, or we don't really want to share all these things. Or you might have a posture of, this sounds great, but like, where do we start? Mm-hmm. That's really the hope in this framework, is to give you a practical reason and way to come together and align in unity, because at the end of the day, you might not have a business together, but these types of exercises of dreaming together, I think unlocks a closeness and an intimacy, because
Definitely.
On the surface, it's just really fun to dream with you, to have those caffeine infused moments like we described that
Sure.
birthed this podcast, that birthed the move.
Yeah.
And so there's dividends paid out,
Definitely.
I keep using that description because it really is what you put in is what you get out, right?
For sure, I agree.
So for us, this exercise has not just given us practical plans and, KPRs and OKRs and all of that to, all the business speak.
Say
what did you say? But it's also given us just another layer to relate to each other on. It's almost really building our friendship foundation, because we're having fun keeping each other accountable, and it's kind of exciting. We're like in a startup together, and we're co-founders,
Yeah,
so,
I think it's a way to kind of take your relationship in your life seriously as you take work things.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. We talk about that a lot, that if I spent half the energy that I spend planning my business and all of that on our relationship and the way we connect and our intimacy, the level of health would be through the roof. And so that's really what we've committed to do, and to give each other our best instead of giving work your best or anyone else your best. So just a little thought before we move on.
Yeah.
So number 4 is our next bucket, and that is family. Familia. This applies to our immediate family. That's kind of what we defined, but as well as extended. But we start with us.
Yep.
Lopez party of 3. So this is also an overlap with relationships, like we mentioned, because you're in relationship with your family, clearly, or hopefully, but with a more intentional focus on the family that God has placed us in. So that's why relationships is its own bucket, and this is like your flesh and blood family. So some of the questions we ask ourselves are we being honorable and loving sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers? And, that's, again, something that we could look back on and ask ourselves, man, did we show up? Did we go out of our way to really love our family like sometimes we love our friends? Because I think you can struggle with that, where if you got really tight friendships, and you desire to be around them all the time, and then sometimes your family you can end up taking for granted. That's something that we've been prayerful about and tried to really make intentional steps toward. And then again, in the future, we ask ourselves, is there someone in our family that we haven't seen in a while, or that like maybe they don't live close by, and we should make that effort? Definitely. We've done that with some of our grandparents when they were in some of their final stages, and we have such sweet memories of showing up and just really making those moments count. And now that they're not here anymore, it's all those photos and videos and just like the funny stories of sitting on the bed with them and really being present. And some of that was, I can remember stemming from some of these planning meetings, and just making sure that like, hey, let's be there this year in this way for this person.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head when it comes to family. Sort of the filter we want to run things through is like, 20 years down the road, are we going to look back and regret the way that we have been with our family? That's good. So I think that always helps, because, like you said, you have your own life and your own responsibilities and your own community around you as an adult. But when you pause and think, what am I going to think later down the road? You'll think, okay, let me plan a lunch with my mom, or let me plan to go, fly out of state and see that person, or those types of things, because they will matter to you. And sometimes if they're not on your daily checklist, it can slip by. Yeah. So I think it's really thinking about like a very future-minded perspective. Yeah. I would say too, just the other things I had in mind for a family were really just prayer, because I think in prayer we hold our families. So we don't see our families all the time. They're a bit of a drive away or a flight away, but we are thinking of them, praying for them, sending them a text, a quick call, those types of things. Communication, I think fitting it in to your life, and that can make such a big difference. It's like small investments can go such a long way with family.
I love it. The fifth, and this is a fun one for us, is travel and experiences.
Yeah.
So
love this one.
For us, that's where we ask ourselves, like, what's the plan for rest and for adventure this year? And out of that, we ask, where are we going, when, how, you got to be intentional about those things or it doesn't happen. With travel and experiences, we said a couple of episodes ago that some of our like childhood vacations were the most memorable core memories that we made. And so that's been an intention for us as we're building our family culture now, that we want to make that part of the memories and part of the things that we do. And not in excess, but really just to have, like I said, some rest, some adventure together, build some memories. So that's been a really amazing focus where we've put detailed planning together, and at least every year we've done something incredible, whether it's like small and local and kind of like staycation vibes, or traveling far away and having a blast. So that's again one of our favorites for obvious reasons.
And I think it's cool too that yes, those were important memories from our childhoods, but also even as just a husband and wife, I mean, we just had a baby this past year, so we're just about to begin doing that with a child. But I would say even as just a husband and wife, when we think about what are our favorite memories in our marriage, we always bring up certain trips, and they've been so special. So I think that for some people that this might not make it on the list. Maybe you don't like to travel, but for us in particular, this has been something that's just like very special to us, and we've wanted to make it a priority. Even when it's hard to make it a priority, like you said earlier, you have to plan for it at the top of the year, or else you're probably not going to get a vacation.
Exactly.
So very good, very fun. We love that one.
Moving on, number 6, health. So the questions we're asking is, how are we stewarding our bodies, the things we eat, the movement we make, the rest we prioritize, which happens in the travel and experiences category. And it all contributes to our ability to achieve everything else on this list. So again, this is one of those dependent pieces that if this Jenga piece gets pulled out, the whole list kind of collapses.
Definitely.
And sometimes, as we've seen, health challenges can make their way into this list that are completely out of your control.
Right.
And so it's really important to make those adjustments as they come along to prevent them from happening again, so that you can actually live on to make these lists in the future.
Right.
And that's something that we're keenly aware of as we're getting a little bit older. And, now it hurts just to get out of bed. No, I'm just kidding.
We want to prevent it from hurting to get out of bed.
This is 30s.
I totally agree that the rest doesn't really matter if your health is out the window. So health has to be, again, this list is in no particular order, but it has to be high on the list. It has to be important. I just had the thoughts around practical disciplines. That's usually what we're talking about when we hit this bucket. We're saying, like, how are we moving our bodies regularly? Like, what does that look like? What are we feeding our bodies? Are we struggling in that area right now? Like, as a family, do we need to revamp something? Do we need to start shopping on a different day? Like, we're always talking about the food and movement piece, but then there's other things too. Like, there's been certain years where it's like, I really want to prioritize seeing a therapist this year, those types of things with mental health. So there's a lot of buckets within this bucket of health, but all in all, it's an important one for sure.
Yeah. Well said. I agree with all of it. Let's move on to number 7.
Okay.
Financial. Are we being trustworthy with the resources we've been given? Are we saving, investing, and giving at the levels that we've predetermined rather than just winging it through the year? That's pretty important, because it's one thing to just say, I invest and save and give, but like, I've always been taught I want to spend my money like I spend my time. And my time like I spend my money, and both on a budget, right?
Yeah,
so
that's good.
We need to prepare for these things in advance, or else you just end up in a place of kind of confusion and maybe resentment or disappointment in your financial circumstance. So we're asking ourselves a lot of times in this case, like, what are we working toward? Are we just saving because that's the right thing to do, or are we saving toward a goal?
Yes, I love that. You've taught me that. It's like there's motivation to save when you have a goal. Yeah,
exactly. And honestly, as we've been in the in-between of like what we were talking about last episode with projects, like big God dreams, sometimes you can lose sight of that and you're like,
Totally.
what is this money even going for? Why are we putting it away? You know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that these types of exercises at the top of the year and throughout, as we're obviously checking in, give you that vision, because sometimes, I mean, you might not have the clarity at January 1,
Yeah.
you know, for what is coming in the year,
Right.
but mid-year you might realize, wow, God is calling us to this thing. Now let's add that to the list and start to save intentionally. And the same goes for investing. Investing can be boring sometimes if you're just sort of doing your auto contributions and 401ks and Roth IRAs and all that stuff. But, you know, we try to think about investing with a broader definition.
Yeah.
So it's not just the stock market or mutual funds. It's obviously for us, it's been real estate and investing in other businesses, investing in people.
Sure.
I mean, that's one of the greatest risks you can take, right? Is
Yeah.
relationships. So we really try to be intentional here and ask ourselves, what are we working toward? And then as we look back on the year past, how did we do, you know, and
Yeah.
did we stay true to that plan?
Yeah, and I'll say that this particular bucket for us of finance has changed a lot throughout the years.
Yeah.
In our earlier years of marriage, it was really focused more about like getting out of debt. There
Yep.
was some student loans and a few things that we were paying off. And so this one's always going to develop and it's going to
Sure.
change. And so if you're like listening to Gabe say like Roth IRAs and all this and you're like, I don't have any of that,
Yeah.
that's okay. Like everyone's finance bucket is going to look different and it's going to change and adapt. But the important thing is that you're thinking about it and having intention around
Yes,
finance.
that's so good. And that brings us to our final and one of the most important buckets on the
Last
list.
but not least.
Yeah, marriage.
Marriage.
The foundation of it all, as I wrote down. So we ask ourselves, are we loving each other well?
Yeah.
Are we putting each other first? Are we growing closer and not apart? You know, that's an important concept to really internalize, is that you're always growing in one direction or the other.
good.
It's not really possible to just be staying put.
Right.
The same principle I apply actually to my business, I apply to us,
Yeah.
which is if you're not growing, you're dying, you know?
Right.
And so we have to ask ourselves, like, have we honored our vows in that way?
Yeah.
You know, when
I love that, revisiting the vows.
yeah, funny enough, we have that printed out in our room.
Yeah.
And you'd mostly do it in jest. Sometimes I feel like you've done it seriously, where you like, I'll be acting like a bonk, as I said in previous episodes, and you'll be like, are you obeying your-"
Romancing with no short supply.
Yeah, are you following your vows? And I'm like, okay, just let me close the robe here. So
No, it's good. It's good accountability to come back to the vows because they are important. They have
Yes.
weight. And I just thought with the marriage bucket, it really is about investing. We
Yeah.
just talked about finances and investing and what you reap as far as dividends go. But when it comes to your marriage relationship, it's like, what are you putting in? And that's what you're going to get out of the relationship. It's going to be a blessing.
Yeah.
It's going to be a strength. It's going to strengthen all the other parts of your life if you are investing into it. So just not thinking about it as the last thing, but thinking
Yeah.
about it as like, this is my partnership in life.
Yes.
This is my covering. This is my companion.
Mm-hmm.
This is so much more than just, you know, a piece of paper, as some might say in regard to marriage. It's our covenant. It's something so, foundational to our lives.
Exactly. Well, we hope this has been helpful. You know,
Yeah.
and like I mentioned, I'm really excited to share this resource. Go to qualitytimepod.com, put your email in, you'll get an automatic download. And like Grace said, feel free to change it. I mean, it's just a template. So if
Yeah.
you're not married, scratch marriage off and put something else, or just
Use
leave
the
it
big
7.
idea, the concept,
Exactly.
and make it your own.
And we'll include even some of our descriptions just to kind of unpack the word, right? So if you're like, what do I do again with this bucket?
Yeah.
That'll be in there as well, just to kind of guide you and help you think through, you know, how to use it for yourself.
This has been fun. I think that we'll have some subtopics that can come out of this week's episode. Like I'd love to do a topic around finance or
Yeah.
maybe a deeper dive into some health things. So that could
Yeah.
be really fun just for inspiring future conversations.
Yeah, let's ask our listeners and watchers to actually comment and let us
Please.
know if any of these buckets warrant a full episode to go
Absolutely.
deep on. Because, yeah, these are things that, like we said, we're not gurus, we're not experts, but,
No.
you know, 9 years of marriage in, we're just trying to get better every day.
This
Like,
has worked for us. This is
Yeah.
helpful to us.
Yes. So we love you guys. Thanks so much. And this has been another episode of Quality Time with Gabe.
And Grace, we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.